Here we are sitting in Dr. Bruce Farkas' home in Florida, looking at the ocean, and I have the opportunity to interview here my professor and mentor, Dr. M. Bruce Farkas. Bruce, maybe you could tell us where you grew up, and then a bit about your career, some background on yourself.
Sure. Well, it all began in a place called McKeesport, Pennsylvania. It's a tiny town, maybe about 70,000 when I was growing up. It's about 15 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, PA. It was a good working place for a lot of the immigrants who came over looking for jobs. And my background is Hungarian, and there was a huge Hungarian group in the Pittsburgh or McKeesport area, and it was an iron and steel town where people could get jobs. And I guess that's what my dad told me when he came over at age 3. So since he set up shop there, that's how and where I was born. So,
did you have brothers and sisters?
No, I was an only child. So I had a lot of attention, except I have a lot of cousins. My father was one of 9 children, and my mother was one of 9 children. So there were a lot of family, aunts and uncles and cousins, and it was a small community such that you would know everybody. So there were, the neighborhood that I grew up in was very diverse. There were Polish, German, Slovakian people, Croatian people. I had friends from every nationality, and it was really a melting pot. And
did you go to high school there?
Oh yeah.
That's when you went to high
Grade school and high school. And
then college?
College was the University of Pittsburgh. Again, it was close by, and it was cheap. Not cheap, but
So
cheaper.
You went to Pitt, where Tony Dorsey played football.
Oh,
Place.
yeah.
You went to Pitt, right?
I went to Pitt, so did the coach, Ditka, and trying to think, it's the area of the Joe Namaths, and I don't know, and down the river, and it's all these rivers in Denora, I think it's Denora, Stan Musial.
That's right, Stan Musial was
So-
from Denora, Pennsylvania. That's exactly right.
So in this area of what they call the Montauk Valley, Monongahela, Youghiogheny, Allegheny rivers of this Pittsburgh, McKeesport, and all these other complexes that were all tied to U.S. Steel. Perry Como, a singer, a barber. All these people, this was just a gold mine of people who came because there were jobs.
So did you always know you wanted to be a doctor, or I believe you played the trumpet? Was your heart in music, or was your heart in medicine?
Well, it's hard to know exactly all the dynamics. When it comes to medicine, my recollections were something like this. I was a really young kid, maybe 5 years old or something like that, and I remember being quite sick to the point where in those days doctors would make house calls, and our family doctor was a tall, good-looking guy, reminding me of Marcus Welby type of guy. And he came to the house, and the thought was whether or not I had appendicitis. But the main thoughts that I had was how comforting this man was, and how concerned, and how he was taking care of me. And somehow there was the thoughts of gelling of what could be a loftier goal than taking care of people. There's all the other stuff in the world to concern oneself with or to fix. And if hit me
So
at that time.
That impacted you, you were just 5 or 6 years old.
Really, from about that time on, to the best of my recollection, that's all I wanted to do. That I always wanted to be a doctor. I began reading about doctors and research, the microbe hunters, Schweitzer, I don't know, anything that I could get my hands on. But somewhere also along the line, I picked up a trumpet and started tooting my horn. I started probably in the very, very early grades of grade school. And I enjoyed it, I guess, because of...
Did you play in a drum and bugle band when you were in grade school? Or I did, and I wasn't very good. I played a little trumpet.
Well,
We can stop.
sorry about that. Daydream about traveling. And I can remember in grade school, somebody handing me a Viewmaster for the very first time. And we only had to see it for a few seconds because we had to pass it on. And it was the Rocky Mountains, never forget that. And it was so gorgeous. You know, I just wanted to keep staring into this thing. I didn't want to give it up. So the band would travel with the football team. I was never big enough to play football.
So you had some visions of a Tommy Dorsey or Benny Goodman
Oh, yeah.
be in a band and travel. Even back then, and look all the traveling you've done now in your retirement. You've traveled the world. It's probably been a boyhood dream come true for you.
Right, so that was great, and same thing when I went to University of Pittsburgh to Pitt in college. We traveled, came down here to Miami at the Orange Bowl, went to New Orleans and played there, played along the East Coast, went up to Army, went to Michigan. We traveled all over the place, so I had a good time tooting my horn and played in some small bands, but if the question was, did I have any thoughts between medicine and music, I really had a tremendous love for music, still do, but I just was average, and in my mind and in my ear was the sounds of really great trumpet music, great playing, and I knew that I could never be that. So medicine was always a love. It was something I could depend on, I think. I didn't know it as a kid, and I didn't know what was really involved, but it was just a thought.
You did 4 years at Pitt?
I did 3 years.
3 years at Pitt?
You know, things were tough. My dad was a bus driver most of his life, and he and his brother finally bought a gasoline station in McKeesport, which for a few years, whatever they had, and they were just eking out a living. And college for me was based on getting a scholarship. Didn't have enough money, so I got a scholarship to Pitt. I had some scholarships.
Academic scholarship?
Academic, right.
So you were a very good student in high school?
Yeah, I worked hard at it, and
Your GPA in high school was?
I think I graduated 13th out of 790 kids, and I did well.
Was the GPA close to 4.0?
I guess so. You know, just a few blemishes, if you will, but I was shooting for the stars because that was a job, because if I couldn't get help, I couldn't go to school, and jobs just didn't pay anything. I can remember working at Christmas at the post office when they would hire for a couple weeks or so, and maybe making 75 cents an hour. Well, it didn't, it just couldn't make it.
You did better than I did, Dr. Farkas. I was 250 out of a class of 500 with a grade point average of 2.0. But my only goal there was to make the varsity baseball team as a freshman, and I did. You did a little better, and I wasn't very focused academically when I was in high school. But you had a driving force. You needed the scholarship to have the finances to go to school.
Well, Terry, you know, I don't know if I have it here, but in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, where I went to grade school, I played basketball. I was a good set shooter. I had a good eye, and I could put those suckers in. If they didn't bother me, they would throw me the ball, give me a second to get set up. I would hit those suckers like crazy. And we had 3 years in a row championship in the city of McKeesport. And when I got to high school, I was a runner. They wouldn't even let me try out. They had guys 6 feet and above. I don't know what I was, 5, 7, 8 at that time. I probably grew a little bit. I got up as high as 5'10" once. I'm shrinking down again. But so they didn't give me a chance at greatness.
The bums?
The bums. However, I got to tell you as a side story that our basketball team in 55, 56 went on to win the state championship in Pennsylvania, this little town in McKeesport.
How big was McKeesport?
At its maximum, 70,000. And they played a team from Philadelphia, East Coast, the east part of the state, the west part of the state. And they played against a team that had a tall black player. I can't remember his name then, but he became Wilt Chamberlain. I guess the name changed because I don't remember anymore.
But was
the kid who played for that high school team out of Philadelphia was the
guy who we know as Wilt Chamberlain, who
right.
played for the Lakers.
And our McKeesport team beat that team with Wilt Chamberlain to take the state championship.
Wow.
So, you know, I keep thinking that if they had only had me there, it would have made it easier
Your
for them.
fame, you could hit all these set shots like Dolph Shea.
You know, poof, poof, but it wasn't meant to be. And and the funny thing was that everybody had a niche. We didn't have many games that we played. There was, in a steel town, it was baseball, and there were guys who were just really good. And football, and my mother she wouldn't let me play football because she didn't want me hurt.
My dad the same. My dad was always worried because he thought, you know, if there was any chance with me pitching that, you know, I'm not going to take a chance to get that arm injured, so he never let me play football.
And only the wealthy kids in our area played golf.
Or tennis, right?
Well, if a guy got into tennis outfits in McKeesport, he'd have got his ears whipped because that was a sissy game. You know, things have changed. In fact, if a guy ever wore shorts in that time, I mean, it's hard to think of that today.
Oh, yeah.
But shorts, pants were not the routine de rigueur. So, you know, you would get catcalls and...
I remember that in the 60s, the same
Okay,
thing.
so this was a man's place, a very, very different era. The things that we did, you know, guys would get an old car and drop the wheels and put the wheel up, or put the front end down and put in
Baby moon hubcaps and headers and glass pack
exhaust and
mufflers.
stuff. That's what we did. You know, you had to do the right
So
stuff.
you did 3 years at Pitt, and you had a full scholarship or a partial scholarship?
I had a half scholarship. I had some scholarships. I had about 4 scholarships in different parts of the country. But again, when it was, the analysis was that when I considered all the cost of living outside of my area, I couldn't afford it. So the cheapest thing was they gave me a half scholarship. But again, time and living was costing money. So I had made the decision to try to get through school quickly. So I graduated in 3 years. I took 19, 20 hours a semester and went around the summer and commuted. So everything went very, very fast for me, and playing in the band at the same time, and drama.
Did you get a baccalaureate degree there?
Oh yeah, I have a Bachelor of Science
So
degree.
your Bachelor's of Science, you got it in 3 years instead of 4, which was pretty
Right, and
energetic.
right, and I had to apply to schools almost in the sophomore year. But it was,
So what kind of student were you at Pitt? What kind of grade point average did you have there? High, like in high school?
well, it was high, but not as high as high school. And maybe I had a 3.25, like an honor student, compared to, I don't know what, I guess a 4 would have been perfect. It was, so the bottom line was that what you had to do was to have grades in a lot of science courses, which were, in those days, you know, somebody who's going into medicine today, perhaps they're much more interested in seeing you with music or engineering or philosophy or anything else.
Okay, so you finished Pitt, you were a good student, and then you made applications to become a doctor. And where did you kind of apply? Do you remember? And then how you got in and how you wound up in Kansas City?
Sure. I applied, you know, being along the East Coast, so I applied from places in Pittsburgh, at Pitt, and the Philadelphia schools like Temple and Jefferson and DC, George Washington. And because I had family down in Florida, there was a new school down here at the University of Miami. And a lot of these out-of-state schools only took a few out-of-state students, like Florida, and the classes were small in those days, like maybe 50. And the University of Miami took 5. Anyway.
Those were all medical schools, not
all medical
osteopathic
schools. Right. I wasn't too familiar with osteopathic schools, except the fact that I had an uncle who was a DO in Michigan, in Flint, Michigan. So I knew he was a doctor, but that was about it. In my part of the world, my exposure to DOs and DCs were extremely limited. In fact, down from my dad's gas station, there was 2 doors down was a chiropractor, and I can remember my dad lifting a garage door, they were large overhead doors, and he threw out his back, and he went to the chiropractor. I used to help him in the gas station, and he helped him immensely. So that was my first positive experience with chiropractic.
So did you apply to more than one osteopathic school or just one?
Well, my uncle, who was responsible for me to apply to an osteopathic school, went to a place in Kirksville, Missouri. And he says, I wouldn't do that to you. He was married at the time, and this was what I would consider perhaps an out-of-the-way place, kind of like a hick town. It was a state college, and it was great for boys and girls, but he said, I wouldn't do that to you. And he says, you should go to Kansas City, just like that. So I didn't know anything about Kansas City, but lo and behold, Kansas City, here I come.
So the applications to medical school, were you accepted there?
Oh, yes, I was.
So
I was probably accepted by maybe 4 or 5 medical schools. Many schools, including University of Pittsburgh, a number in Philadelphia, and the University of Miami. So I had accepted, I talked to my dad. It was going to be quite tough, and because of living, but I had aunts and uncles down here, and I accepted this one of 5 out-of-state positions at the University of Miami down in Coral Gables. I don't know how I impressed these people, but I had met the dean of the school, who was from Ohio, nice fellow. He was a PhD in biochemistry. And what was exciting about the area, by the way, was that Howard Hughes, who was alive then, was funding the University of Miami Medical Center with monies for research and building the place. So this dean was always telling me about meeting with Howard Hughes and the foundation.
You followed the lead of your uncle rather than to become a Miami Hurricane and you landed up in Kansas City, right?
Right.
So you did your osteopathic training. You were 4 years there, right?
Oh yes.
And after you graduated, and I'm sure you were a good student there, right? You had a good GPA.
You know, I don't remember. I think I was a good student. People, you know, I see classmates and they tell me I was a good student, but I really wasn't as intense. I certainly seemed to think I was more relaxed, and I just felt good there.
And the finances for osteopathic school came from?
Well, I met a woman there who I married, and she became a school teacher. So back in those days, maybe she was making, I'd say, about $400 a month. And I got a job with my vast experience from high school and also in college with the post office. I was viewed a hotshot post office man, so I got a job as soon as school would finish until maybe midnight I would work. I was always envious of the kids who had pharmacy background because they could work and sit with a book and study, and those suckers were getting $5 an hour.
Yeah.
And I think when I graduated, I finally, from the post office, and would get a 10% night differential. I think I got up to $2.39. And I'd go out on the docks and I would be slinging 80 to 100-pound sacks of mail and boxes. But there were some really interesting characters out there, and then I would come home and study.
Did you come out of osteopathic school with a large debt?
No, I don't think so.
Not too bad. So
Not too bad, because I'm the kind of guy that I just never liked debt. I tried to make things work, and we were living within our means. We lived in a little studio apartment, you know, hardly room for a couple mice to move around, but we did that. There wasn't anything extravagant. Maybe once in a while we'd go to a movie. On the weekends I worked. My wife also worked, so...
So when you were in school there, were you always driven to be a radiologist, or were you wanting to be something else, or how did you get into radiology?
Well, I don't know that where I was going. It always seemed that surgery had a certain appeal from the standpoint of find something wrong, you see it, cut it out, and you're better. That simplistic approach, it's pretty naive, but that's what I was thinking of surgery. And somehow, I just got turned off because when I did an internship, which I did in Michigan, because there were a lot of DO hospitals and a large number of residency programs there. But a lot of these guys were really pompous. I mean, they were just, you know, not my kind of guys. And you had to be a member of the club, and you had to kiss butt, and that wasn't my nature. So,
So the holier-than-thou attitude of the surgeon, which is relatively omnipotent, and we've both seen it, drove you away from surgery to look for something else.
Although I have a friend in Phoenix who used to give the assignments for all the work in the hospital, and he used to load me up with the surgery detail because they were the harder cases, and if you did the history and physical, then you had to do the surgery on them, and so sometimes you'd be stuck for 2-3 hours perhaps in a surgery, and if somebody else was on a peds case for a tonsillectomy, maybe they'd be in and out in a half an hour, and they could get lost in the hospital for 2-3 hours, and I'm standing on my feet. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed actually seeing and doing stuff and getting my hands in there. And the other services that I liked was the emergency room. So,
So actually, when did it bite you?
well, I did have exposure with some nice guys in X-ray at the hospitals. They were really nice, intellectual. They talked about this aspect. And what I did notice in the crevice of my mind was how everybody would interact. You know, a surgeon would come down, peds would come down, internal medicine. Everybody was into some facet of radiology.
You know, you once said to me, and you're touching on it right here, that it kind of made you feel like you were the doctor's doctor. Because you
Doctor's doctor.
You were the doctor. You said that to me many times.
Right.
It made you feel good because you were impacting their treatment.
It's an excellent feeling, you know, because one, you knew of everything going on around you, and people were coming in. You were a nerve center, impulse, kind of like the brain. Gets that sensory input and then sends out the motor response. So everything in and out. And that ultimately was the decision clincher.
And then why Chicago? Or did you apply to more than one place? Or was
Well, no, you know, I never thought of Chicago. It's really amazing how one has preconceived notions. I mean, where did I live? I lived only in McKeesport. Really I wanted to get out of that area because it was during the war years. It was really dirty. There was a lot of smoke and dust and soot, industrial area. It was filthy, so I couldn't wait to get out of there. Actually, and so when I went to Kansas City, that was really kind of neat, really, really nice. And the difference was that supposedly there were more opportunities, and that's where I went to Michigan for the internship. Well, while I was there, a kid that I interned with went to Chicago. There was a new residency that had opened up at the Chicago College of Osteopathy. It was the school, and they were just approved for their very first resident. And this fellow went to Chicago. In the meantime, my wife and I were expecting our first child, and my father was quite ill, had finally got away from McKeesport and had retired to Florida. And I made the decision to be down there and be with him during his latter days of life. So David, my number one son, firstborn son, was born in October, and we came down after I finished my internship in Michigan and came to Florida, and I opened up a little small office here. And my dad subsequently died in late April or May, less than 5 or 6 months after my son was born. And I lost the interest of doing the general practice. And
how old was your dad when he died?
He was about 68. He died of a massive heart attack. And I just didn't, I lost all interest. But this friend who was in Chicago, we were pretty good. We were of like temperament. And the head of the department, a fellow by the name of, he was the head of the department, happened to be in Florida for a convention. And he sought me out. He gave me a call, and he said, I can take another resident. I've heard good things about you. We met, and on the spot he said, if you want to come, you have a spot. So I figured, well, my friend had put in 1 year.
In radiology?
In radiology.
In radiology.
So that was it, and that was the pool, and that's how I came to Chicago. We immediately got into the Hyde Park area where the school was and started looking for an apartment, and everything was unfurnished, and so I had to find a place and that was large enough and go shopping, and did all that, and Chicago was home for the next 3 years.
So you did 4 years in radiology there and did well, and then you stayed there, right?
I had an offer from the head guy to stay there. He liked me, and
Was that Harold Katzen?
Harold Katzen. So I was the first resident hired. He did not like the first.
Your friend, the guy who was there?
And he ended up in Texas.
So you got the job.
I got the job. He was pretty upset about that, but everything worked out. And
So you did, and at that point you were doing everything. I mean, you were doing GIs, fluoro, you know,
the
whole gamut, right?
the whole
You didn't
gamut.
focus on any one particular area.
But what you have to remember, Terry, is in those days, compared to what you have today in imaging, it was pretty basic. So I trained, for instance, in fluoroscopy with dark adaptation, putting on like World War II
right?
plastic glasses for 20 minutes at least to adapt and go into a totally dark room and having a flat fluoroscopic screen
Right.
and putting a patient behind the screen, putting the pedal on and turning on the tube and getting blasted with all this radiation. And over the years, I've blown out my thyroid because we didn't shield it and had no eyeglasses.
I have a similar story. I used to drive from Lombard to the Chicago General Health Service at 4800 North Ashland, and they had an old fluoro unit in there, and it would take you 30 minutes to dark adapt your eyes. So I would put on these red glasses and drive from Lombard downtown Chicago and have my eyes dark adapted so I could go in and do the fluoro right away. And I did this when I was coming to work with you too. And I can't tell you how many accidents I almost had because I couldn't read, you know, everything is red.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I'm looking at the stop signs and people are looking at me like, this guy's from Star Wars and Mars, what's with these red glasses, you know? So I know early in my, right at the end of that era, I learned to kind of do fluoro that way too, and it was archaic.
Of course.
So now it's time for us to talk about Joe Moretti. The Chicago policeman, cigar smoking, loud, fast running guy, who I wind up going to chiropractic college with at National College. I finished, he graduates, he goes and makes a fortune because he knew all these cops. And I run into Joe. He was married to Honolulu, who was a German, and I married a German, Inga. And I was with him once, went out to dinner, and I said, you know, Joe, I'm doing this radiology residency, and you know, I can just learn so much at the Chicago General Health Service and the clinic in Lombard. Man, I need to get into some medical exposure. I mean, I'm just being hampered. And Joe Moretti said to me, you know, Terry, I think I could help you. I know an osteopathic radiologist who reads at one of the clinics I own downtown that I work with. I'm going to talk to him and see if maybe he'd be willing. Gosh, Joe, that'd be great if you'd be willing to do that. And it wasn't too long after that Joe called me and says, if you go down here on Saturday at 12 o'clock, there's a guy down there by the name of Dr. Bruce Farkas, and he's agreed to at least talk to you. So I got there at 11 o'clock, and I sat in the parking lot. And I walked in at 5 minutes to 12, because I was eager. And that's the first day I met you. I think that was my memory. I think it was the fall of 1974, because I did my residency between of 72 and 74, and it was right near the end of my residency, and my residency was not good enough. It was incomplete. I didn't have enough exposure. So I walked into this clinic, and you were back in there, piles of films all over your lap, and someone introduced me to you. That day changed my life. And I remember us sitting there and talking, and you said, well, yeah, you could come down here, and I'm over at this hospital, I'll talk to somebody, and maybe I can get you to come in there. I remember that day very vividly, as if it happened a moment ago. I mean, I don't know if you do.
I do. I do.
Maybe you could tell us of your memory and where it went from there, Bruce.
Well, I remember being approached by Joe and talking about a young man who was in training and needs or anxious to learn more radiology. And he thought, was there anything that I could do? And I said, well, I don't know, but it sounds good to me. If I could help somebody, that's who I am, and we'll see what we can do. So, arrange a meeting. And I remember we were at the, I think it was Joe's office, which he shared with an entity, I believe it was called Stony Island X-ray. And so at that time in my life, besides doing that hospital practice, I was doing a lot of other things, reading.
Multiple clinics all over Chicago.
All over Chicago, including the draft board, which was a draft board then, and other entities. And this was one of them where we did fluoro and static readings. So I do remember the day that you came and Joe introduced us, and you indicated that you were in a residency program and you wanted more exposure, and if I could help, then I believe I said yes, and those were days that changed both of our lives.
And I remember you invited me to the hospital, which to me was like parting the Red Sea as a chiropractor, because there were no chiropractors going into any hospitals doing anything in the fall of 1974. And that's where you invited me, and that's where I first came, which I cherished. I never sat with you in those clinics. I think you wanted me in a better, bigger environment so I could see more. And I know you had to, you know, probably twist a few arms to get me in the back door there, and then I spent 2 years with you.
We did. I think as far as I know, you had a chair right next to me. Whatever I saw, you saw. Whatever I did, you did. And from whatever procedures were coming into that hospital, from fluoroscopy, you started just as I would as a resident, putting on the gowns and gloves behind me, to being able to point things out, and then to the point where you were controlling the machinery and I was behind you checking, to the point where I actually left the room because of your competency level, and there it went, from exposure to chest, to bones, to GIs, to IVPs, to interventionals, whatever was going on, pediatrics.
Did you come under any pressure or negative from Katzen for having this chiropractor in this department?
No. Originally, everything was fine because we had discussed it, and the issues were make no waves.
I remember those days. In order to be able to come down and spend a Friday with you, and the odd Saturdays when you were on weekends, the great Joseph Howe allowed me some release time. And if you remember, I went to Chicago General Health to read those films after I was with you in the morning on Fridays. And in order to be there at 7 o'clock to do fluoro with you, I had to get up at 4 o'clock and fight an hour and a half traffic one way from Lombard to get to Hyde Park, because it was it was nothing but go downtown and fight traffic. I didn't care what it took. Whatever price it took, you know, is what it took, right? And I remember the day that you said to me, it was on a Saturday, because you pulled, you know, you were in the emergency room on Friday night, tired as hell. It pulled Saturday, and every Saturday that you were on, I would come, because I needed to be with you. And I remember the first Saturday, you had 10 upper GIs and 10 upper, they had an upper GI and lower GI room, upper GI and gallbladders, Barry Meadows in the other room, and we went one room to the next. And you said to me, he says, well, we got 8 or 9 upper GIs, and we got about 10 little Barry Meadows on the schedule this morning. And you need to just go do it. And I said, well, wait a minute. Yeah, I can do it, but I mean, aren't you going to watch me? He said, I don't need to. Terry, just go do it. So, it needs to be clear here. I then was practicing medicine under his license. And that gave me a confidence that I'll never forget. So I did the fluoro, did all the spot shots, and you're reading films, and I shortened your day a bit on that Saturday because, you know, if I'm doing 20 GIs, you don't have to do them. You had 100 sets of films to read, and them clowns on Friday night, they didn't read them all, so they left all the damn tough cases for you. You told me about that hundreds of times. So, you know, you're swamped with work. And I would sit with you, with the overheads, would Terry, that looks like a filling deck. Did that clear under fluoro or didn't it clear? Oh yeah, it cleared, Bruce, it wasn't an erosion. And I mean, you trusted my knowledge because you taught me. And then what you really gave me was confidence. And I think maybe I was right more than I was wrong. I was wrong, but not all the time. And that was a confidence level for me that I'll never forget. That changed my whole, you know, ability to function as a radiologist because I was seeing, you name it, A to Z. I was seeing it all.
Well, we all have those moments, Terry, and I think somehow we clicked. Just like any two people who are meant to be together, they click. And if we had not from that time of the meeting, when we first met, to starting our training together, there was the feeling that it was going to work, and here's somebody that I can trust. And I was terribly impressed by your desire to learn, your enthusiasm. Your enthusiasm today is as strong as it was then. It has not waxed or waned, and that was something that I picked up on. And during those times that we were in the hospital, in the radiology department, you lived and breathed radiology, and you just couldn't get enough. In fact, you devoured it. It was nutritious for you. It allowed you to grow, and I felt an empowerment by being able to facilitate your beginning radiological career, because I felt that you had so much more to accomplish, and if I could help you in any way, I was glad to be a part of that. So I was excited. It was wonderful, and of course I trusted you. We spent the time that was required for you to obtain baseline knowledge. You did your homework, you read, you asked questions, what you didn't know. You didn't stand back static and just accepted things. You prodded me, and I prodded you, and it's what a good relationship does, and it becomes trusting and growing, and with the right environment. You grew and did everything that was expected of you and more. So it was a wonderful time, and it worked out very well for both of us.
You know, the training you gave me, it lasted a little over 2 years. I left Chicago in September '76 to go, left kind of reluctantly because I really didn't want to leave. But, you know, circumstances were such there with the AOA and the rulings, and it became difficult for me to continue to function in that environment. And I'll never forget the final meeting I had with you in Chicago at the hospital when I came to say goodbye to you. I was going to go join my dad's practice, just general practice, which I wasn't sure that's what I should be doing, but out of respect to my dad, I need to do that now. I didn't have a job. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? How am I going to take all this knowledge that Dr. Farkas has facilitated, and where's it going to work? And I remember you telling me, Terry, you know what? You need to go just become a big fish in a small pot. You have the knowledge, you have the ability, you'll make your own way. And I guess I believed you, but I wasn't sure. There was some doubt in my mind. And of course I went into St. Louis and on to Australia, and the rest was history. But I will tell you, the knowledge that you gave me, and the confidence that gave an already confident person is carried throughout my entire career. In Australia, when I was up against the MDs fighting the chiropractors for registration boards and the physicists, this chiropractic radiologist shows up, and the professor of all of Australia, Dr. William Hare, we used to call him Bunny Hare, right? You're a chiropractic radiologist? No, you mean you're a radiographer and a chiropractor. There's no radiologist as a chiropractor. No, sir. I did a residence. I'm a chiropractic radiologist. And I stood up, fought all the battles like you did, and I won for the profession, not for me. That confidence you gave me, and I have carried that into my profession to try to uplift the standards of my profession. And, you know, who could ever believe where it went? Look, I mean, I've written a book. I mean, I can't believe I wrote a book. I mean, can you believe I wrote a book?
I knew you were going to do great things, and I want to remind you of a previous episode in Chicago, that your dad was in Chicago, and you came with him to the military entrance and examining station, the draft board. And here was this big military complex with guys parading, hundreds and hundreds of guys coming in, and I brought you in to the radiology, and we looked at stuff. And what I remember is this: your dad was so proud of you. He saw you as a radiologist. And so the time that we had spent and his happiness in knowing not only that you were in the chiropractic field, but you were a chiropractic radiologist, and that you were here looking at x-rays of chests and bones of every person who's coming into the military from a 6-7 state area, and that you had been exposed to that and you were holding your own with anybody. This is what you saw. I saw that he was proud and he viewed you as a radiologist. And I knew that, and you knew that. And you knew that you were going to take the ball and run.
Yeah. The book? I don't think either one of us thought I could have wrote a book.
No, but things, you know, just like that meeting, things happen at a moment. And whatever took place at that moment where the germination for a book took place, you were at the right place, the right time. You were primed. You were cocked for something to happen. And bingo, it did. Was it any reason to not expect that a beautiful flower would turn out from that seed? I don't think so. I didn't know that there would be that book, but I knew that whatever was going to come, and I knew that there were going to be good, beautiful things to come, that it would be pretty, it would be great, it would be memorable, because you saw the stock. I had met your dad, I had met your mother, knew the family. You know, there's a lot to be said for breeding.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm proud of the fact, and we want to remind anyone who's reviewing this, that this book, published in 1987, and Dr. Farkas wrote the foreword. This second edition, 1996, and Dr. Farkas wrote the foreword. And in 2005, the third edition of this book publishes, some 20 years later, that Dr. Farkas has written a foreword to the third edition of my book. And somewhere in the middle of all that, he gets a lawyer's degree on top of his osteopathic degree. You didn't sit around twiddling your thumbs either, Dr. Farkas. And to have a foreword in a book that's been successful with the likes of Donald Resnick, it's a great honor for both of us, right?
You made me very, very proud, very privileged that you would ask me to write a foreword. So, yes, I thank you for that.
And you know, Bruce, not just the foreword, because if you look in almost every chapter of the book, after many photographs, M. Bruce Farkas, D.O.J.D., Chicago, Illinois. After many, many pictures in this book were cases that you had shared with me that I actually wound up publishing the book, and
I appreciate that too.
and they'll never change. You know, they'll always be there. And you know, you did that little quiz corner for the osteopaths, and it was from the quiz corner that I got the idea to write my radiology quiz corner in the ACA journal. Some lady is looking at all these articles that I was writing and writes me a letter and says, would you like to write a book? So if you take it back, it was when you showed me this, you know, little thing you were doing for the AOA journal. This was your idea, and I kept those articles. There's one on kind of differential diagnosis of arthritis in the hand, and I kept them. And so that idea you had that you gave me, I took that idea, even though it was maybe 8, 9 years later, but it never left me. That in itself stimulated, if you take the chain back, the letter from Williams and Wilkins for me to write the book.
I'm happy beyond belief to think that we're sitting here and talking about somebody as driven, as successful as you are, and for you not to forget somebody from your past. I'm highly honored, and I feel really great that we can still talk about way back when, because it's like that moonshot. That sucker, that rocket, when it leaves the pad, it has a lot of power. It hardly seems like it's moving, but once it gets going, it is flying beyond belief, and that's what you have done. You have, from a slow start, you have skyrocketed, and I'm only glad that I could have a little bit of say in pushing a movement, and you've gone, you go and continue to go to areas that have not been explored, not only in the chiropractic radiology, but in any radiology.
Well, you know, another fond memory, when I was the only chiropractic radiologist in the southern hemisphere of the world, I was the only show in town, good, bad, or indifferent. And this young guy in 1979, I get tracked over to Wellington, New Zealand to give expert testimony to the New Zealand Commission of Inquiry, the greatest, most in-depth commission of inquiry into the history of chiropractic in the world. And I have to submit my credentials and my submission and whatever. And I'm sure you remember, the New Zealand Medical Association, through the American Medical Association, called you because I had listed that I had done residency training under you at the osteopathic school, and those guys were going to try to discredit me in any way they could. Remember when those guys told me, did you train Jerry Yochum? You mean to tell me some chiropractor was in here? And you told them, of course I did. And I know that was what they were hoping they could use, that I falsified that and could take me down, right? Discredit me before I spoke. And I remember that. I remember that you called me and said, hey, Terry, the AMA's calling me, what's going on?
Nothing phony about you, Terry. What you see is what you get. Actually, that's not true. You get a heck of a lot more than what you see.
You're being kind. You know, 2 disappointing things for me in my career. One, we fixed. I can't believe I never really went and spent time with you in the ER room, because I believe you were a very good ER physician, and I should have done it, and we were just both busy. And one other thing that very much disappointed me, but we fixed that, was that you were so busy and so was I. You never got to see me pitch in Chicago, and I'd had some success there in Chicago. But it was 2 years ago, down at the Cardinal Fantasy Camp, which I'm here for now, that you drove all the way up to Jupiter, Florida, and you saw me pitch against an ex-All-American 38-year-old guy who was 58, and I took that 1-0 lead into the 7th inning, and you got to see me pitch. Probably one of the better games in my senior career of my entire life.
Or you burned some really good balls, Terry.
Against a guy who was an ex-All-American,
you know,
who was 20 years younger than me.
You might be 58, but you don't have to. And that ball sure doesn't know that it's being whipped around by a 58-year-old. It's probably saying to itself, I can't believe the power. Geez, I'm liable to lose my skin.
And I got to believe the the extra effort that I gave that day to pitch that game, some of that adrenaline, that sympathetic response was driven by you sitting there. And because I so wanted you to, you know, be able to see me do something at a high level that had impacted my life forever. And we just never were able to do it in Chicago, but we got to do it here at the Cardinal Fantasy Camp. And
We did.
I thank you so much for coming up that day to see me do it.
My wife Debbie was there with us. She was as impressed as I was. Just, and all the people were cheering. It was just great looking at you dressed up, and you were strong.
You remember I got hit that day with the pitch?
Yeah.
And Whitey Herzog and Red Shandies and Lou Brock were all sitting over there. And I got hit with the pitch. That a kid threw hard. He was that 38-year-old guy. He was throwing the ball high 80s, and my hand went numb. I lost the feeling in my hand, and I was laying there. I don't know how long it was. It wasn't that daggone long, but he thought it was too long. And he said to me, he yells through the screen. I know you heard it. He says, "Hey, Yochum, get up. This is not the Academy Awards." Don't rub it either. Well, and, so that day I was fortunate enough to pitch well and was blessed to have you there to see. It impacted my life forever.
Well, God bless you.
It was really great.
Well, it's worked for both of us.
And I really am so glad that you got to meet and know my mom and dad, because they did have a huge impact on my life, as your parents did. We're both family guys.
They're absolutely, and I feel privileged to have met them. They're wonderful people, and because I had the opportunity to meet them, and maybe more so with your dad, to really understand who you are and where you came from and where you were going, maybe before you did.
Yeah, maybe before me too. I think there's a good chance that was the case. And I'm forever grateful knowing that when you were an osteopath and some of the medics kind of looked down their nose at you there at Michael Reese in Cook County, you didn't forget, you passed it on. You took in a little lowly chiropractor who was a little lower down on the rung. I wasn't in allopathic medicine. And I think maybe that had an impact on, well, yeah, I can help this guy. I kind of know how those guys feel. And I was lucky that that was part of your persona, because it was a great circumstance that you were willing to take time with me, because I took time away from your work. I mean,
we had to make it happen, and today, for all of our professions, now we can move a lot better than we could then. So
yeah, my dad was thrown in jail for practicing medicine without a license twice in 1936. So, I was able to get this training, and I know my father was so thankful that you had created that opportunity for me, and I know you know that. I know you saw it in his eyes.
As I said, from the times that we worked together and seeing you work with me together, he was happy.
Yeah, he was happy and grateful for the opportunity, as I have been.
And you don't let him down. I know that.
Yeah, I don't think I might have let him down when I was younger, when I wasn't that good a student. All I was doing was chasing baseballs and girls, and I caught more baseballs than I did girls, and I wasn't too good at that. But I think I made him proud around the corner.
You sure did. I know that.
I think I did that, and I think if I wouldn't have come to Chicago, there were two guys in Chicago who changed my whole life: Joseph Jamesy and Dr. Farkas. And that was Chicago. I really wanted to stay in St. Louis and go to Logan. I had a girlfriend there, and I had a couple of teams paying me to pitch semi-pro ball. I didn't want to go to Chicago. Boy, how wise my father was. You'll know where Joe Jansey was. And where Joe Jansey was is the same town where Bruce Farkas was. Yeah.